Open world games always stir up the same arguments, but it's not combat or creatures that we're talking about. It's travel. My name is Codiak, and in today's Hytale survey results video, we'll be breaking down over 800 responses to the question, what would be your ideal way to travel across Orbis? Designed for comfort, built for performance, the Onyx gaming headset combines the best of both worlds. Forget the flashing lights, the Onyx headset is all about quality. Enjoy high-fidelity audio and all the features you want as a gamer. Pluggable performance. Immerse yourself in the game. Since the first open-world games burst onto the scene, players have been at odds over the simple idea of travel. And it really goes back to the age-old question, what's more important, the journey or the destination? Now, I have my own thoughts on the subject, but let's get some of the big numbers out of the way first. I'm sure it's no surprise to any of you that mounts are a central theme in a lot of these responses. In fact, the word mount appears 563 times in the survey. Now, there are a handful of people saying that they have no interest in mounts, but the overwhelming majority want mounts to be an integral part of Hytale's travel. Realistically, we already know that this is going to be a key feature in the game. If we look back at the trailer, you'll all remember the iconic scene of the soldier charging into battle sword ablaze atop a Zone 3 ram. What's not clear is how mounts will be obtained in the game. At least 31 people want mounts to be tameable, which I think could be a really interesting system. We've already seen a wild animal used as a mount, so I think there is some possibility that the team is working on making that a reality. With the taming system, you actually satisfy multiple groups of people, players that want to use mounts as means of transportation, and players that just want to collect creatures and build a menagerie. Collecting anything cosmetic, whether it be weapons, items, or mounts, is always a point of pride for players, and showing off what they've collected is a favorite pastime of any massive multiplayer game, so I can imagine it'll be a staple of Hytale. Now, in terms of what people want to tame, well, I was a little disappointed in the lack of creativity. Horses and dragons top the list, combining to over 160 responses. And while I'm not surprised, I was shocked to see so many players sticking with some of the classic open world tropes. Obviously, horses fit well into most adventure games. They're highly customizable, slightly fantastic, and are a realistic option for players looking for authenticity. Dragons, on the other hand, open up a whole new conversation, one I think is going to have players arguing even after the game is released, and that's the concept of flying. As you all know, dragons aren't just creatures of the ground, they belong in the sky, and while this is their natural place, that opens up a can of worms the Hytale community may not be ready for. Now, we do already know that some sort of flight is implemented in the game. During my interview with Noxy, he confirmed that the use of balloons is a good standard for vertical travel, so it's safe to assume that there will be some sort of air transportation, but he stopped short of confirming anything beyond that. Not only is flight a challenge for the developers, but adding it into the game reduces the scope of the world for the player. Yes, moving from point A to point B becomes easier, but it removes the sense of accomplishment and planning that's required to traverse across a dynamic landscape. Players would no longer have to think about how to overcome their environment, they would just simply hop on their flying mount or into their flying vehicle and jet off to their next destination. It's a challenge that games like World of Warcraft have been grappling with each new expansion, and eventually, the team landed on a sort of hybrid approach, grounding players at the beginning of new content and eventually opening it up to flight after a period of time. There are always restrictions on the flight itself, whether it be an invisible boundary or certain zones that prohibit flight, but at the end of the day, there are always two sides to the argument. Players that want a more accessible experience and players that want a more immersive one. Since this is such a volatile topic, I wanted to open it up for input, and this is where you guys come into play. Let us know your thoughts on flight in the comment section below, whether you think it should be in Hytale and to what extent you'd want flight to be accessible to players. Your opinion matters and goes a long way to shaping the conversation, so don't be shy and let us know what you think. Now, mounts are all well and good, but there is a large chunk of players that's looking for something a little more instantaneous in the form of portals. In fact, the word portal came up over 350 times in our survey, and it's clear that for these players, the destination is more important than the journey. Now, portals can be done in a bunch of different ways, and we should talk about those because they dramatically change the way players move across a world. If we look at a game like Diablo, portals are used sparingly to help players get back to a home base, or to transport them to a new zone or area. Now in Diablo, there used to be a consumable element to the portals. Players would have to carry around a scroll that would allow them to teleport, but in the most recent edition of the game, the team did away with that system. Now some diehards may complain that removing the scrolls changed the immersion of the game, but at the end of the day, it was just taking up room in a player's inventory and not really adding much in terms of depth. Diablo also used waypoints in addition to portals to help players return to previously visited zones, and I think this could have some application in Hytale. While we don't know exactly how zones will be laid out, we can safely assume that there will be some rules that help define each area. Waypoints could make Orbis accessible without making it feel small. Another popular method of transportation in other games is fast travel, which allows players to return to points of interest instantaneously. And while this may work in adventure mode as players work to complete quests, what this system does is drastically diminish the idea of exploration within a game. Again, we come back to the question, what's more important, the journey or the destination? Fast travel is an efficient system. Players have to initially discover points of interest all on their own. Once they've completed a quest or unlocked a waypoint, they'll have instant access to that area all the time. The truth is, fast travel facilitates further progression in a game. Less time moving around the landscape means more time questing and adventuring, and while some players like this, others just don't. Again, it's a time-tested approach to video game travel, but an idea that could be met with some resistance from the community. Our final big picture idea is one that I've seen pop up a number of times across all of our Hytale videos, and that's vehicles. From blimps to planes, motorcycles to submarines, you guys have asked for it all. I want to first start off with ships and submarines, an idea of traveling across and under the sea. As many of you may have noticed, a ship can be seen in some of Hytale's recently released material. Now there are a few truths we have to come to terms with. This ship could be purely cosmetic and have no impact on players' experience on Orbis. On the other hand, the ship is docked in a city, which could prove to be a hub for fast travel or another method of transportation. Of course, there is always the wild fantasy that players can build or purchase their own ships that they can then captain however they like. And while I'm not opposed to this idea, I'm not sure how practical it actually is. We already know that the ocean plays a big part in the Hytale experience, but it's hard for me to wrap my head around an open world nautical experience. Obviously, experienced modders can make anything become a reality in Hytale, but in terms of the base game, I'm just not that sure. In the same vein, submarines would dramatically change the underwater experience. Similar to flying mounts, submarines are a significantly more efficient method of transportation. But do they change the dynamics of exploration to a point where it becomes less immersive for the player? I'll leave that call up to you. On land, I think vehicles play a similar role to mounts and could be used in a similar way. The real argument against vehicles is more of an aesthetic one. Adventure mode channels dungeons, dragons, magic, and mystery, so giving players the option to drive around a race car just seems a bit out of place. Whether you want mounts or portals, how players get access to different methods of travel are just as important as what the method of travel is. A lot of you alluded to a merit-based system in your responses. Players would have to complete a series of quests or achievements to unlock new mounts. The harder the quest, the better the mount. Players also were in agreement that any sort of fast travel system would have to be earned by exploring a zone or completing a quest before that hub was unlocked. Of course, all of these systems are common trends in modern open world video games. Skyrim, The Witcher 3, World of Warcraft, Legend of Zelda all use some sort of system to speed up the travel process. Of course, there are always games that look to break out of that mold. If anyone is familiar with the recently released game Outward, you might know that it's a massive open world game with no mounts and no fast travel, and while authenticity is the goal, I don't think Hytale will come remotely close to towing that line. Of course, Hytale is also about creation, and many players requested the ability to craft or create modes of transportation. I can see that level of creativity making it into the game, but again, I'm not sure how far the team will develop the concept. Of course, as we get closer to beta and launch, this is something we'll be monitoring very close. So whether you walk or run, swim or sail, travel defines exploration. The team at Hytale will have to make some big decisions that will undoubtedly shape our adventure on Orbis. As always, we want to hear from you. Your voices were loud and clear in the survey, but leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think about travel in Hytale. Don't be afraid to unleash your wildest ideas in the comment section, because we love reading them. And remember, if you want to keep this conversation going after the video is over, you can always join us on Discord. That link is in the description below. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at the Game Gurus, thanks for watching, and play on.